Jamuna Tiro Bana Chari Jamuna Tiro Bana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yasodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiro Banachari Yamuna Tiro Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Mutpataram Sabribrajacharya Stakare Small Vitam Saraswati Goswami Bhagavad Jaya Ananda Kori Vaishnava Ki Jaya Ramacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Jaya Names of the whole Sri Krishna Chaitanya Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivacharya Gaur Bhakti Jaya Sri Radha Krishna Bho Gopinath Sam Kanda Radha Kanda Giri Ki Jaya Vrindavan Dham Ki Jaya Navadvip Dham Ki Jaya Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Guru Dwarka Dham Ki Jai, Swami Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, all glories to the all glories to the Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Mother, my humble obeisances. Hare Krishna.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, Mother. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you.
Nice to see
You are welcome for today's class. More devotees will be joining shortly. So I will put the verse on the screen, then we can start the class, please.
And where are you, Prabhu?
Hello?
Where are you? Are you in Ghana?
No, right now I'm in Germany right now.
You're in Germany?
Yeah, I'm hosting from Germany, yes, today. Yes, but I'm from Nigeria.
Wow, very well.
Yes. So I'll put the verse on the screen and we can start the class, please. Thank you.
Shall I begin, Prabhu?
Yes, Mother, please.
Okay.
It's from 55 to the end, 58.
Okay.
Because it has short papers and the other one don't have papers. So we close the chapter 7 ends today.
Okay. Thank you all so much for inviting me to your holy Srimad Bhagavatam Sangha class. Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nastaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama bhakti bhavati naistuki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 7, texts 55 through 58. Sutta uvacha Arjuna sahasagyaya harer hardamatasina manim jahara murdhan na yam dvijasya sahamurdajam. Translation. Just then Arjuna could understand the motive of the Lord by his equivocal orders, and thus with his sword he severed both hair and jewel from the head of Ashvatthama. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Contradictory orders of different persons are impossible to carry out. Therefore, a compromise was selected by Arjuna by his sharp intelligence, and he separated the jewel from the head of Ashvatthama. This was as good as cutting off his head, and yet his life was saved for all practical purposes. Here, Ashvatthama is indicated as twice born. Certainly he was twice born, but he fell down from his position, and therefore he was properly punished. Text number 56. Vimucha rasana bhadham balahatya hata prabham tejasa manina hinam shibiran nirayapayat. He, Ashvatthama, had already lost his bodily luster due to infanticide, and now, moreover, having lost the jewel from his head, he lost even more strength. Thus he was unbound and driven out of the camp. Purport. Thus being insulted, the humiliated Ashvatthama was simultaneously killed and not killed by the intelligence of Lord Krishna and Arjuna. Text number 57. Vapanam dravinadanam stanam niryapanam tata eshahi pramabandhunam badho nanyosti daihika. Cutting the hair from his head, depriving him of his wealth, and driving him from his residence are the prescribed punishments for the relative of a Brahmana. There is no injunction for killing the body. Text number 58. Putra shokatura sarve pandava saha krishnaya svanam mithanam yat krityam chakro nirharanadikam. Thereafter the sons of Pandu and Draupadi, overwhelmed with grief, performed the proper rituals for the dead bodies of their relatives. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyabhari Paschatya Deshatarine. Mukam karoti vachalam pangolam kayate girim yat kripastamaham vande Shri Guru Ninataranam vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhu vayevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you all for joining today. This is Srimad Bhagavatam class. Haribol Kamaniya, nice to see you. And welcome to all of you from different parts of points east of New York. So if you're coming in the middle of this story and you don't know the background, what's happened up until this point, the Pandavas, Draupadi, the wife of the Pandavas, had 5 sons who were sleeping, 5 young sons. And this Ashvatthama, who's the son of the beloved teacher of the Pandavas, Dronacharya, especially his favorite people was Arjuna. So in order to destroy the dynasty of the Pandavas, and in order to please Duryodhana, the evil cousin of the Pandavas, this Ashvatthama, this son of Dronacharya, came and killed these sons of Draupadi while they were sleeping. So this is being called infanticide. So it's a hideous act. It's a horrible act. And so the question is now, Bhima was the more hot-headed of the Pandavas. He said that he should be killed. And in fact, in the earlier part of this chapter, if you want to look it up to read it later, it's chapter 7 of the first canto. Krishna was also saying he should be killed. But Draupadi, being very compassionate, even though her own sons had just been unfairly in such a hideous murder, she's saying that she didn't want the mother of Ashvatthama to be crying the way she was crying. So how compassionate, how broad-minded, such a beautiful, compassionate Vaishnavi. So that's the backstory. So it's an equivocal instruction because Krishna's saying that he should be killed, but Draupadi's saying, no, don't kill him. And so Arjuna is trying to figure out what to do in the middle of these equivocal instructions. So what we just heard in these verses is that Arjuna, by his discerning intelligence, he cut the jewel from his head. There was a jewel tied in his hair, and he cut off that jewel and cut off his hair. So he was humiliated, and then he was driven out of the camp. So he was killed and not killed at the same time. So that's just to give you a little bit of the backstory. So it's a very, very difficult thing in life. So often we have these situations where there's conflicting wisdom, and we don't know what to do. Conflicting instructions we may receive, or even in our own minds, we may be divided about what to do about something. Should I go here? Should I go there? Should I take up this job? Should I not? Should I move to Switzerland? Should I not? Should I go to Germany and take this job? Should I not? What should I do? So always in life, there's so many dilemmas. So in this situation, we have to look, what is justice? What is mercy? What is justice and what is mercy? So justice should teach us and should evoke some change in the heart, right? Restorative justice rather than what's called recriminative justice. Justice just to punish someone. Like I know in America, sometimes there are people just rotting in prisons without any training, without any education, without any restoration. And then they come out of prison not having learned any skills or any redemption. And so often they go back to the same neighborhood, or they go back to the same group of friends, and they do that kind of thing again. So justice should be restorative, not just to punish people, but to teach people so that they can learn. And those who are using the tool of justice should be using it with discrimination and with compassion. The first thing that comes to mind for me, this is a class in Ghana, Africa, but the first thing that comes to mind for me is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, what an example to the world that they had so much suffering, so much injustice, so much war, and uh, so much killing, and so much pain and sorrow. But yet they were able to make this Truth and Reconciliation Commission, whereby someone who'd committed some kind of a crime, a hideous crime, just like this crime that was just being discussed in the Bhagavatam, someone who might have killed someone's son can come in front of the mother of that son and say, yes, I killed your son, and this is the way I did it. And I'm so sorry for that. Please forgive me. So this kind of redemption and remorse creates a change in the heart. This is very, very difficult for people to do. And the mother standing in front is somehow able to forgive him, and he's somehow able to forgive himself, and then they can continue to live. So, yeah, contradictory instructions. Should this person be killed? Should he not be killed? It requires discernment and sharp intelligence. So we pray for this kind of intelligence. We pray for intelligence from our guru, from Krishna, to have that kind of discernment. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna was speaking to Arjuna also when Arjuna wanted to run away from the battlefield. He wanted to become a beggar. He didn't want to harm his relatives. He was really overwhelmed with compassion. And he didn't want to kill his relatives who had been so aggressive toward him, toward his brothers, and tried to kill them in so many ways. He didn't want to kill them. So the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is also overwhelmed with compassion. But in that situation, in that particular situation, Krishna wanted Arjuna to be his instrument to bring down the negative elements in society. As Krishna, this is Krishna's purpose when he comes to this world. First of all, to uplift the devotees, but then to bring down those negative elements. Paritranaya sadhunam vinasaya chaduskritam dharma sangstar panartaya sambhavami yuge. So in order to reestablish the principles of religion, to bring down the evil elements in society and to uplift the holy people, Krishna comes again and again. So sometimes Krishna's instructions are very equivocal, right? It's very, very hard for people when they start reading Bhagavad Gita. This is supposed to be a spiritual book, but it really just looks like a war story all about battlefields and killing. But Krishna is saying to Arjuna at the beginning, he's saying, if you decide to become a beggar and leave this battlefield, people will just mock you. And for one who's been honored, dishonor is worse than death. So in this situation, we have that line comes to mind, because this Ashvatthama, he's the son of a very, very great father, and he has been honored. But now to dishonor him will be worse than death for him, right? So sometimes you can think in your own life right now. Hello, Sarah. Good to see you. Hello, Susan. Think in your own life when you've had an equivocal situation. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I take this job? Should I take this money? Should I do this? Should I move here? We've all had situations like that. And sometimes Srila Prabhupada's, Hare Krishna, good to see you. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada's instructions have been equivocal also. So he says, be humble, but also preach vigorously, right? Don't be attached to success or failure. But then he says, do something wonderful for Krishna. In the early days in New York, Srila Prabhupada told the devotees to eat as much prasadam as they could, to just fill themselves up to the neck. Eat as much as you can, because he knew it would purify them. And then after a while, when they were eating too much and becoming gluttonous, he told them not eat so much. And so one of those early devotees was saying to Prabhupada, but Prabhupada, first you told us that we should eat so much that it filled us all the way up to the neck. And now you're saying that we shouldn't eat so much. And Prabhupada said, yes, you believed me then, you should believe me now. So it's good to accept the most recent instruction, right? Sarah has a classroom full of students, roomies and zoomies, some in the class by Zoom and some in the class actually in the room. So if she said yesterday, okay, all of you go to the next class right now, but today she says something else, you have to accept the most recent instruction, right? Sometimes it's a big quandary for devotees. Should I study more or should I do more service? How can we find action in inaction and inaction in action? Very equivocal, right? What's the balance between justice and mercy? I always like to quote that line from Shakespeare: the quality of mercy is not strained, it falleth as the gentle rain from heaven. And Shakespeare talks about how the quality of mercy is more becoming in a king than his beautiful crown on his head. Mercy blesses the one who receives it and the one who gives it, right? So we have to look. So this Ashvatthama is being called the son of a Brahmin. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about this in India. And I'd say even in our ISKCON movement, who is a Brahmin and what are the qualities of a Brahmin? So what are the qualities of a Brahmin? How can someone really be considered a Brahmin? Is it just that they get a 2-cent thread that they can hang around their neck? Not exactly. So the qualities of a Brahmin are described in Bhagavad Gita, particularly in chapter number 18, verse number 42. Samadhama tapasocham shantirajavamevacha jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahma karma swabhavajam. So here's the qualities: peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, religiousness. These are the qualities by which the Brahmins work. So there's something called Devi Varnashram, which means divine Varnashram, or the divine way of dividing society by quality and by the way people work, not by birth. So what's really brought down the whole scenario in India these days is that people have been for many centuries judging that someone is a Brahmin just by work, by their birth, not by their qualities, and not by the work that they do. Another verse, here's an important verse from the Padma Purana. Satkarma nipuna vipra mantra tantra visarada avaishnava guru nasyat vaishnava swapacho guru. Even if a Brahmin is very learned in Vedic scriptures and he knows the 6 occupational duties of a Brahmin, which means to learn Vedic wisdom, to teach Vedic wisdom, to perform yagyas, to teach others to perform yagyas. There's 6 of them. He can't become a guru unless he's a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, if one is born in a family of dog eaters, some people in this world eat dogs. They're considered to be pretty degraded, but is a pure devotee of the Lord, right? He can become a spiritual master, right? So the mundane varnashram, the misunderstood varnashram, the way it's misunderstood in many places in India and even in ISKCON, is to judge by birth, not by qualifications. And this has brought down the whole society because Brahmins become proud of their birth, and pride is not a quality of a true Brahmin, right? So there's a very favorite story of mine that I'd like to share. I don't know if you've heard it before. Let me see who's in the chat here. Something's come in the chat. Oh, yeah. Look up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Yeah. So there's a story I'd like to share that I think is very instructive. This is an ancient story that once a young boy came to a great Brahmin teacher and said, "Oh, Maharaj, I would like to become your disciple." And the great teacher said to the young boy, "Oh, and who is your father?" And the boy said, "I don't know who my father is. I'll have to go ask my mother." So he went back home and he asked his mother, "Who is my father? I don't know. I never knew my father." And the mother said, I'm a very unfortunate woman. I've had many men, and I also don't know who your father is. I can't say who your father is. So the boy, imagine, very humiliating situation, right? The boy went back to the great teacher and he said, I asked my mother, and she said she doesn't know who my father is. And so the great teacher, because he was really a realized teacher, the great teacher said, oh, you are a true Brahmin. I will teach you. Why? He didn't know who his father was, right? He came from kind of a degraded background. But because he was so truthful, the great teacher could see that he had the qualifications. He could be trained to be a true Brahmin. So I think this is a great story, right? So there's so many examples of proud, arrogant Brahmins misusing their power. Of course, the famous story in the Srimad Bhagavatam when this young boy, the son of a Brahmin, his name was Shringi, the son was Shringi. Maharaj Parikshit, really just to bring about the whole telling of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Maharaj Parikshit was out hunting. The kings used to hunt to practice so they could bring down the bad elements in society. So he was out all day and he was thirsty, and he came to the hut of this great sage and he said, please give me some water. But the sage was deep in meditation. He didn't hear him. So Maharaj Parikshit, it was uncharacteristic of him, but he got angry and he took a dead snake and he put it on the neck of that sage, walked away. And then the son of that sage, Shringi, came along and said, how dare he do this arrogant king? Because the Brahmins, the teachers, are supposed to be above even the rulers. They're supposed to be the teachers of the kings. So he got so angry and he cursed Maharaj Parikshit. And that's the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So yeah, this pride of the Brahmins, so-called Brahmins, brings down the whole civilization. So if someone is going to be a temple president, a guru, a father, a mother, a community, a leader, they should never neglect those who are under their care or misuse their power, because people so easily can lose faith and lose trust. The other day we were on a call, a Zoom call. There was a memorial service for a wonderful devotee who passed away last year. His name was Shruti Dharma, and he was the leader of the community at Bhaktivedanta Manor for many, many years. The devotees loved him so much. And on this Zoom call, many people were remembering him and telling beautiful stories about him. So this one girl told a story that many years ago, when she was a brand new devotee, Shruti Dharma, she had the chance to go to India for the first time. And Shruti Dharma Prabhu handed her an envelope when she was about to leave. And she was surprised, and she opened the envelope and there was 100 pounds inside. And he said, this is for you to use while you're in India. And she was so amazed. She was so grateful to him. And then the story even goes on. When she came back from India, she came to see him. And there was a very important member there and giving Shruti Dharma Prabhu all these gifts. He'd also come back from India. And she was just standing there waiting. And Shruti Dharma was saying, wait. And so finally this big important member was left. And Shruti Dharma said, so you've come back from India. What did you bring for your parents? And she was surprised. She said, oh, I didn't really think to bring anything back for my parents. And so Shruti Dharma then took all these gifts that he just received from this important member and gave them to her and said, these gifts are for your parents. So this is leadership. This is how devotees develop love and trust. But we see in this chapter, and we see in India today, and sometimes in ISKCON, that people are Brahmins, but they don't have they have the thread, they have the mantra, but they don't really act with the qualities of a Brahmin. So there's a quote from Bhaktivinoda Thakur in one of his songs where he says, who is this Kali Chela? Chela means disciple. So who is this disciple of the age of Kali who's wearing tilak and wearing neck beads, but is just an imposter in the dress of a devotee. So we have to really, really be careful to actually develop the qualifications and actually develop the actions and the qualifications if we want to be a Brahmin and not be an imposter in the dress of a Brahmin. Because we will also, if we are an imposter, we will also contribute to bringing down the whole society in the Kali Yuga. There's a beautiful verse, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nyasi Sudra Kene Nai Ye Krishna Tattva Veta Se Guru Hai. Whether one is a Brahmin, a sannyasi, or a Shudra, the lowest class of people, regardless of what he is, he can become a spiritual master if he knows the science of Krishna. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Krishna knows the heart of all of us. He sees our heart. And we so often can misjudge. Better to err on the side of mercy rather than erring on the side of harsh judgment. We may also be looking at someone and thinking, oh, this is just an imposter. But maybe that person is not an imposter. Maybe that person is really an authentic person. So we have to learn discernment by the grace of Krishna, by our own sadhana and our own chanting of the holy names. We can be graced with discernment, right? There's a story of Tamal Krishna Goswami. When he was in Mumbai, there was a brahmachari who was there, and he was started smoking and started hanging out on the beach. He was hanging out with some yogi on the beach who was teaching him how to pass a coin into one ear and bring it out the other ear, some kind of yogic magic trick. And he wasn't really taking Krishna consciousness very seriously. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj was saying to Prabhupada, this man should leave. He shouldn't be here anymore. Our members are going to get bewildered by him. And it's kind of a long story that I won't go into, but finally Prabhupada said to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he said, you don't understand that there is no limit to the mercy of Lord Nityananda. There is no limit to the mercy of Lord Nityananda. So if we have a position of leadership, or even if we're just leading our own children or our own family, or leading a classroom, or acting as an attorney, or leading in some way, teaching students, everyone is a leader of some sort. If we're not leading anyone, then at least we have to lead our own senses to the right path, right? So we have to be very, very careful to follow this mood of compassion of Lord Nityananda and reserve harsh judgment, right? It's another story from when I was living in the temple in Boston at one time, and there was a very, very eccentric young man who joined the temple. He was so eccentric. I can't even tell you really what he was doing because it's a bit embarrassing. He would just sort of stand in the corner and face the wall, and yeah, I can't even really tell you more because it's too embarrassing. But the temple president was really a very kind person, but he was having a hard time tolerating this person. And he wrote to Prabhupada that I think this boy should leave because he's too eccentric. And Prabhupada said that, why can't you tolerate his behavior? Why can't you find it within yourself the tolerance to allow him to stay? Anyway, this young man ended up becoming a tremendously brilliant Sanskrit scholar who translated many of the books of the Goswamis in Vrindavan that no one else had translated at that point. So he was a brilliant person, but just quite eccentric. Yeah, so quite an amazing story. There's another letter from Prabhupada where Prabhupada, the devotee, this is a temple president who wrote to Prabhupada, and you can tell from Prabhupada's response that he must have said to Prabhupada that this person is so intolerable, I can't tolerate him. But then he must have said, but I have to give the devil his due. He is a very good book distributor. So Prabhupada, in his response, he says, you say you have to give the devil his due, right? Prabhupada repeats that. You say you have to give the devil his due. So why don't you just try to tolerate him the way I try to tolerate you? Isn't that interesting? Prabhupada. He thinks he's so big. He's such a big shot temple president. And Prabhupada's telling him, just try to tolerate that person the way I try to tolerate you. So the best way to think about these things is that, wow, I'm so full of faults myself. I'm, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said once, he said, I myself am honeycombed with faults. Like if you look at a honeycomb, so many holes, right? I myself am honeycombed with faults, so many holes in my character. Somehow Krishna's tolerating me with all my faults. So how can I learn to tolerate other people, right? How can I learn to tolerate other people the way Krishna tolerates me, the way Srila Prabhupada tolerates me, right? So, yeah, it's an amazing story, this story of Ashvatthama. Here the Pandavas are all gathered together. Their 5 young sons have just been killed. Bhima wanted Ashvatthama to be killed, and they're all mourning this tragic, senseless, cruel murder of their sons. And it's quite amazing because Krishna's standing right there. Imagine that. Someone comes and kills you. Say you have 5 sons. Someone comes and kills your 5 sons, and the personality of Godhead, the supreme controller, is standing right there. Wouldn't you think, hey, Krishna, why me? Why did you allow this to happen? We're supposed to be your devotees. You're supposed to be our friends, right? But it's said that the Pandavas, their love for Krishna never wavered at all, even in the midst of so much tragedy and so much loss. Their faith in him never wavered. Isn't that amazing? And this mood of Draupadi is such a mood of a pure Vaishnavi. She begs Arjuna and Krishna to spare the life of this Ashvatthama. And she says in one of the previous verses in this chapter, she says, do not make the wife of Dronacharya cry like me. I am aggrieved for the death of my sons. She should not cry constantly like me. So look at her character. This is the difference between a compassionate Vaishnavi, devotee of the Lord, and a materialist. A devotee feeling her own pain. She doesn't want to cause pain to others. She doesn't want to see others cry the way she's crying. But a materialistic person tends to want revenge, right? Tends to want to make others cry. Because I'm crying, others should cry also the way I'm crying. But sometimes Krishna has to use his devotee to help him execute his plan in the world, as I was explaining before. And the verse where Krishna asks Arjuna to be his instrument is in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 11:33. Nimittamatra bhava savyasachin. Get up, Arjuna. Prepare to fight and win glory. Conquer your enemies and enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They are already put to death by my arrangement, and you, O Savyasachin, can be but an instrument in the fight. So it's interesting that in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna finally, after hearing the 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna comes to the realization that Krishna wanted him to fight in the battle, and he surrendered, and he became empowered to act as Krishna's instrument. But yet later in life, which we see described in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, later in this part of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, after the disappearance of Lord Krishna, Arjuna is remembering Krishna's instructions. He's feeling great separation from Krishna. Krishna's just left the planet, and there are inauspicious signs all around him. And Arjuna is lamenting, feeling great separation. But Arjuna at that time understood, and Yudhishthira understood, that Krishna wanted them to prepare to leave this world, to go to the north, to go to the Himalayas, to renounce their kingdom. And isn't it interesting that the very thing that Arjuna had wanted to do just before the battle of Kurukshetra, what he wanted to do at that time, now he's getting realization and discernment that now is the right time. He's getting the understanding that this is the will of Krishna, that now is the right time to renounce the kingdom, to go to the north, to head to the Himalayas and to leave this world. So that's a very interesting point, don't you think? That we need discernment to understand the time, the place, the circumstances, what to do in this time, what is the right thing to do. Srila Prabhupada in his last days was translating these Srimad Bhagavatam purports of the 10th canto, which he called his emotional ecstasies. And he was barely able to speak. But in one of those very last purports in the 10th canto, Srila Prabhupada, it's recorded, you can see in one of the beautiful films by Yadubar and Vishaka, Srila Prabhupada's lying on that final bed, and Jayadvaita Swami is holding the microphone up to his lips, and he's speaking this purport, and he says, everything is moving, acting under the supreme desire of Krishna. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So this is discernment, to understand, to be able to see how everything is moving, acting under the supreme desire of Krishna, and how can I follow Krishna's will in such confusing circumstances. So it's a great test of our faith when there's tragedy, when there's loss, when there's hardship. So many people have lost relatives, have lost friends, have lost family members during this COVID pandemic. Recently, we lost a very dear godbrother, Karnamrita Prabhu. He was a very kind and very kind of a jolly, sweet devotee. And he used to always say that his problem was complacency. And finally, he got cancer. He struggled for many years with that cancer, going to so many healers and taking so many different treatments, many difficult treatments. And he passed away recently. So at his memorial service, his very dear devotee wife was telling us that after getting cancer, Karnamrita Prabhu told her that cancer is the answer. Cancer is the answer to this complacency he'd been feeling all his life. And he also told her that cancer was Krishna's own embrace. So how amazing, right? Bhaktivinoda Thakur also says, Marabira kabi yogi chatahara, nitya dasa prati tua adhikara. He says, with such a mood of surrender, my mind, my body, my family, whatever is mine, I've surrendered at your lotus feet, O youthful son of Nanda, O Krishna. Slay me or protect me as you wish, for you are the master of your eternal servant. Just like Prahlad Maharaj, right? His father's standing in front of him with that gigantic father, right? He'd brought down all the demigods, and here's this little boy, and the father's standing there with his sword, and he's telling Prahlad, I am your God. Why are you worshiping a false God before me? And he's saying to Prahlad, I'm going to kill you. And somehow Prahlad Maharaj had such great faith that he knew that his father would not be able to kill him unless Krishna gave his permission. So what tremendous faith that is. And Hiranyakashipu is saying, is your God in this pillar? And Prahlad was just seeing Krishna everywhere, right? Yes, my God is in that pillar. So Hiranyakashipu smashes the pillar and out comes Lord Nrsimhadev. So I'd just like to say that as we wrap this up, that this world is a very bewildering place. And so we should try to serve Krishna and his devotees, giving mercy to all his beloved unlimited jiva souls, by giving them Krishna and by giving them mercy in whatever ways we can, Try to live in the best way you can as an authentic devotee and as a servant of all devotees, and not live as an imposter. Try to walk our talk, right? And there's so many bewildering and difficult situations that we see in this world, but we see from this most instructive story of the Pandavas that we should try to be blessed by discernment, as was exemplified by Arjuna. So pray and consult with wise elders, and sometimes people need to learn by tough love also, right? But we need to be rooted in order to have discernment. we need to be rooted in sadhana, in a daily practice, to have a foundation of a daily practice of sadhana and a daily practice of chanting a certain fixed number of rounds. And then we can gain discernment. We can gain discretion how to deal with situations. Krishna will give us intelligence in our heart. I wanted to read to you something from Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita. There are 4 verses in Bhagavad Gita. Maybe you know they're called the 4 nutshell verses. Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, verses 8 through 11. So verses 10 and 11, Krishna says, "To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance." So there's one paragraph in the purport to the first verse I just read where Prabhupada says something interesting, speaking about discernment and how to receive it. And he says, a person may have a bona fide spiritual master and may be attached to a spiritual organization, but if he is still not intelligent enough to make progress, then Krishna from within gives him instructions so that he may ultimately come to him without difficulty. The qualification is that a person always engage himself in Krishna consciousness and with love and devotion render all kinds of services. He should perform some sort of work for Krishna, and that work should be done with love. If a devotee is not intelligent enough to make progress on the path of self-realization, but is sincere and devoted to the activities of devotional service, the Lord gives him the chance to make progress and ultimately attain to him. So I find that really reassuring, don't you? Very reassuring that I don't feel very intelligent, but still, if I just try to be sincere and do the process, then Krishna will give me the intelligence. So most often people will respond and be uplifted by mercy in the form of kind instructions and receiving the benefit of the doubt. So we should always try to lean in the direction in favor of giving mercy rather than harsh punishment. And that's the mood of Srila Prabhupada. That's the mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And only Krishna is able to see and understand the heart of another living being. So best to let Krishna be the judge and not set ourselves up as a big judge of other people. But most of all, Krishna is pleased when we extend mercy in the mood of Lord Nityananda. And remember how Lord Nityananda begged Lord Chaitanya to be merciful to Jagai and Madhai, right? They were such naradamas, such lowest of mankind. And so if we think that these situations are impossible, how can I have discernment? How can I understand what to do and what not to do? Just remember, right, we're just a little more than a week before Lord Chaitanya's appearance day. So remember that Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda are the sun and moon rising in the sky at the same time. So that's impossible, right? When have we ever seen the sun and the moon rising in the sky at the same time? Never. So just imagine that impossible things can become possible by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, Srila Prabhupada, and all these merciful teachers coming into cyclic succession, sharing this mood of Premanam Sankirtan, chanting the holy name. So thank you all so much. These are a few thoughts on this extraordinary verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. So thank you. Are there any reflections or
Thank you, Mother, for your nice class.
Thank you
so much. It's a wonderful class. I have some questions or some feelings. I was trying to understand because Krishna was standing there when Ashwatthama killed the sons of Draupadi. So I was trying to ask, does the 5 sons represent any anathas the devotees should kill in their body in devotional service for Krishna to stand by and watch him slaughter them? Maybe there may be some spiritual significance what they signify. I never knew. Just wonder.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, but not that I know of, and I wouldn't want to speculate on that. I haven't ever read that. I mean, we do read when Vasudeva and Devaki had their first children were being killed, the first 6 sons, right? And then Balaram was 7 and Krishna was 8. So those 6 sons do represent different anarthas in that example that's said. But I haven't ever read that about these 5 sons. But certainly it's a heinous act, right? He wanted to wipe out the whole dynasty so that there could be no more Pandavas ever on the face of the earth. But somehow or other, Krishna was able to save Maharaj Parikshit, who was still in the womb of his mother, right? So thank you. That's a very perceptive question. You have a lot of discernment. And just imagine Krishna's discernment that he was able to save this one living descendant of the Pandavas still within the womb of Uttara. Actually, there's an interesting story that there was a woman who was a devotee woman who was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and she was pregnant and she was losing the baby. The doctor said that the baby was going to die. So she and her husband called up Prabhupada and asked Prabhupada to pray for this baby. And Prabhupada did actually pray for the baby. And then they were so grateful. And then they asked Prabhupada to name the baby. It was a little girl. And Prabhupada named the baby Vishnu Rata, which means saved by Vishnu. It's the name of Maharaj Parikshit. Prabhupada named the little girl Vishnu Rata. So yeah, it's amazing, the mercy that is available to all of us with discernment. There's a nice, yeah. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts?
No, just go on. You wanted to say there's a nice, go on, please.
Say the other thing that I wanted to say? Okay. There's a really nice song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur called Nadia Godrume Nityananda Mahajan. Kamaniya, you should sing the song. It's such a beautiful song. Really, really beautiful song. And in this bhajan by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, Krishnera samsara kora chariyanachar, jive daya Krishna nam sarva dharmasar. He says, give up all sinful activities, carry on your worldly duties only in relation to Lord Krishna, and show compassion to other souls by loudly chanting the holy name of Krishna. And this is the essence of all forms of religion. So, yeah, it's really at the essence of our Vaishnava tradition to show compassion to other living beings. We go back together in Sangha, in Sankirtan, not by pushing each other down and pushing each other out of the way. What is the name of the bhajan? It's Nadia Godrume Nityananda Mahajan. Nadia Godrume Nityananda Mahajan. It's really a beautiful one. So yeah, show compassion. This is you all know better than me. Prabhupada came to Africa and asked the devotees, those white people, why aren't you preaching to the African people? Why are you just talking to all these rich Indians? He told them, go out and have kirtan. And then everybody ran into the kirtan, right? So Krishna consciousness is without discrimination, without prejudice. It's for everyone, of every country, of every village, of every town. And we should try to extend that mercy to the best of our ability, wherever we are, wherever we live, wherever we dwell. Yes. Anybody else have questions?
Yes. Next question from Sahadev Prabhu.
Okay.
Sahadev, please.
Hare Krishna, Mother.
Hare Krishna.
Again, thank you very much for the wonderful class.
Thank you.
I have a question about discernment. In the sense that as devotees, we are always advised and encouraged to stay away from offenses and false or bad criticisms. But as humans, we're going to, at some point, take a decision and make a judgment based on a situation. And I would like you to draw a distinction between someone trying to make a correction, trying to help a devotee become a good devotee, and the person saying that, well, I'm not Krishna, I don't know the heart of this person, I don't know whether what I'm perceiving is the actual truth, so I'm just going to be quiet. And especially if you are like in the position of leadership, it's your responsibility to take care of those uh, under you, those dependent on you. And you are afraid that if you make this statement, such a person is going to be offended and maybe bloop. So I would like you to throw a bit more light on that.
Thank you very much. It's a very important question. And I think the answer to your question is in your question itself, because you said, you know, if we're in leadership, and in one sense, everyone's in leadership, right? We all, as I said earlier, if we don't have someone that we're leading, we have our own 10 senses and sense, you know, that we're leading, right? Our five senses and our feet and our legs and our hands, right? So yeah, but the essence is really, it's in the intention. Is my intention to really care for this person, to uplift this person and help this person become the best version of himself, the best version of herself? Then that will be seen also by those people. How can I serve you? How can I help you? It's not just a matter of, you know, holding a stick over someone's head. And so it's always a matter of this fine discretion. And sometimes, you know, sometimes people act out and they need some tough love or they need some harsh punishment. But then a wise person knows how to come back then and restore the relationship in other ways. So, yeah, it's a very, very difficult thing. And therefore, it's so important that each of us has the practice of sadhana and going deep into prayer and chanting every day, so that I know how to treat my mother-in-law or my teenage son or my 2-year-old or my husband when he is cruel to me, or my wife when she does something, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So we need that discernment, but it's all about our intention. Am I doing what's best in caring for this person so that they can open up their heart more to be a better, as I said, a best version of themselves, to be a better lover and servant of Krishna? And even if they aren't interested in Krishna, how can they learn to take the next step by my example of love and compassion? And Srila Prabhupada was always giving those kinds of examples. One example that you know, I love is that in the early days in New York, Prabhupada had so many, you know, such a you know, cast of characters, such a group of ragtag band of followers, untrained people, arrogant and proud and lazy, and just come off drugs and just stopped eating meat yesterday, and all this kind of stuff, right? And Prabhupada was they were lazy and they were arrogant, and Prabhupada was helping the landlord of the storefront take out the garbage every day, just helping him in order to set an example and to be kind, while these other guys are just kind of being lazy and being difficult. So you know, I always remember the beautiful quote from St. Francis where he says, I try to preach all day long, and sometimes if necessary I use a few words also, right? In other words, by his behavior he's trying to be preaching all day. So in ISKCON, everybody talks a lot about preaching, right? There, in one lecture, Prabhupada said, we are hearing so much preach, 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 but they do not know they must be empowered to preach. So if I'm going to share Krishna's message, I have to be blessed by Krishna in order to do that in the proper way, to be effective, to have discernment. Discernment is a great blessing, but those under your care will know if you're disciplining them or chastising them with love and with care. And sometimes if it has to be harsh, then come back a little bit later with a gulab jamun and say, this is for you. This is for you, right? And especially, teenagers love to test the boundaries. But so, and some devotees are like that also. So we have to do it with love and with care. But sometimes there have to be boundaries. It's said that healthy people have boundaries that keep the good things in and the bad things out. And bad people have boundaries that keep the bad things in and the good things out. So if you're dealing with people who have boundaries that are messed up, it's very, very difficult and it takes some time. But with time, they'll see your example if you keep trying, if you keep being merciful. And sometimes you have to say to someone, this is not the right place for you right now. You're not able to follow these principles. So better you go out and see, what other desires you have in the material world and try this Krishna consciousness a little bit later. Sometimes that's the best thing you can do for someone because they're not ready to be, living in a temple community. So discernment is so important, right? Anything else? Anybody else have any thoughts?
Thank you, Mother.
Questions?
Next question from Salika Prabhu. Salika, please.
Hare Krishna, Mother. Thank you very much for this very inspiring lecture. It's so
Thank you.
really
I think the inspiration was in your heart, though, before I said anything.
I'm going to talk still about discernment, and it's a very important thing in practice of day-to-day devotional life. And you quoted my most famous verse. I think my devotional life, the first verse I learned, the first purport that I crammed in my head was that purport you quoted, 10:10 of Bhagavad Gita, where Prabhupada talked about when a person may have a bona fide spiritual master, he may have may belong to a bona fide organization, and yet he may not be intelligent enough to be able to, but Krishna will come with him. And in the next verse, Krishna said how he does that. But in our day-to-day practical life, Arjuna has an opportunity, was standing right before Krishna, and Krishna was giving instructions. And sometimes our spiritual masters also sometimes also give direct instructions. But in our day-to-day life, it doesn't come every other day. So my question is that when we are either in a leadership position or whatever position, in our day-to-day devotional life, we face so many complexities and then we have to take a decision what to do. How do we recognize that voice of Krishna when it comes true to us? Because sometimes you could think maybe my mind is playing on me. How do we lead?
Right. Very important question. Thank you. I think the best thing is to ask Krishna to give us intelligence at every minute, and be speaking to him and telling him and praying to your Guru Maharaj and to Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, and say, without your direction, I'm definitely going to make the wrong decision. I'm definitely going to mess this thing up, and therefore, before I do anything, before I pick up a broom to sweep my house, before I walk to the temple, before I pick up my beads, please give me the discernment to do this in the proper way, because without your guidance, I'll definitely make the wrong decision. So ask Krishna. At every moment, that's the best thing, to be chanting Krishna's name incessantly, right? Incessant prayer. This is so important. If we can come to that, then Krishna will be guiding us. But certainly before any decision, to ask Krishna, I don't know what to do. I love the prayer of Maharaj Prithu in Srimad Bhagavatam, where he says, we're the kids. You're the father. The kids don't know what's best for them. The father knows what's best. So I may pray in my own way, but I may be praying for all the wrong things. So you know what's best for me. And this is surrender. You know what's best for me. Should I take this job? Should I take this job? Should I move to Germany to take this job? Should I move to Nigeria to take this job? What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? So pray to Krishna. And the more we're in touch with Krishna's holy name on our tongue, chanting Krishna's name incessantly, we will get guidance, we'll get intelligence. And when we're fingering our beads, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, when you're fingering your beads, you should meditate that you're massaging the lotus toes of Lord Gauranga. So in this way we get intelligence, because we're just tiny, right? Krishna's infinite, we're infinitesimal. And this is the best thing, to always keep that contact, because we forget and we lose contact. We're like little sparks. The spark, when it flies away from the fire, it can go dark and go cold. But when we're in Sangha with the fire, then we're dancing and happy. So I think that's the best answer. It's very important, though, to have that. If we're just on automatic pilot all day, certainly we'll make so many mistakes. We'll say the wrong thing, we'll do the wrong thing, we'll go the wrong place. So the best thing is to always be chanting Krishna's name and praying to Krishna. Thank you. Thank you for wisdom.
Thank you, Mother, for your answer. I have another question from the paper, from translation of text 57 you read today. The translation, Prabhupada was saying, cutting the hair from his head, depriving him of his wealth, and driving him from his residence are the prescribed punishment for the relative of a Brahmana. There is no injunction for killing the body. So my question is, if depriving someone his wealth, his residence, and shaving of hair is equal as killing the person, why didn't they just do that and avoid the Kurukshetra battle?
Why didn't they just kill him?
No, why didn't they just deprive the Pandavas or the Kauravas their wealth and shave them and send them away to stop the war that kills so many people?
Right.
But Papa is saying here there is no injunction for killing the body.
Right.
Here we were killing the bodies.
In the situation of a Brahmana, right?
Yeah.
So this is no injunction for killing the body of a Brahmana, right? But in the battle of Kurukshetra, they were not Brahmanas who were on the battlefield. For the most part, they were Kshatriyas, and it was Krishna's order that they be killed. So when we read Bhagavad Gita, we think, wow, I'm into nonviolence. Why so much killing? I can't get into this kind of, killing, all this killing, but that was Krishna's desire. And that was Krishna's desire, and they were not Brahmanas for the most part. There may have been some Brahmanas there, like Dronacharya, and by Krishna's order, in that circumstance, Krishna wanted Dronacharya to be killed. So yeah, discernment, do this. Here's, someone could have quoted to Krishna, hey, you said to not kill Brahmins. Here's a Brahmin that's getting killed, Dronacharya. But we have to really be sensitive to hear the proper instruction. Or as I quoted that other instance where Arjuna wanted to become a beggar, he wanted to leave the battlefield. And in another part of the first canto, in a few chapters coming up, Arjuna does leave the kingdom. And he does start walking to the north, to the Himalayas. So time, place, and circumstance. Maybe at one time in your life, this is the right thing to do. But maybe in another time of your life, something else will be the right thing to do. So therefore, we have to consult wise elders and have discernment and live with discernment based in a foundation of sadhana and chanting the holy name. Time, place, circumstance, discernment.
Thank you. Sahadev, we have another question. Sahadev,
One more question from Sahadev.
Hare Krishna, brother. Well, your answers are always so beautiful.
Thank you. Your questions are more beautiful.
Yeah. See, I'm so fortunate. I'm a grand disciple of Srila Prabhupada. You were a direct disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And for me, reading about Srila Prabhupada, I never met Srila Prabhupada personally, physically. And I haven't even seen him in my dreams. I'm so sinful. But I read about Srila Prabhupada, and when I read how such a great personality in his advanced age has to take all the trouble that he went through just to establish a house in the name of ISKCON, for a useless person like me to have a shelter in it And when I see people try to minimize and misinterpret what Srila Prabhupada said, what Srila Prabhupada did, it, it's, I don't know how to describe it, it's so painful. So my question, the bottom line is, where do we draw the line between what we read from the scriptures, what Krishna is telling us, what our Guru is telling us, and what our own God-given intelligence, what our mind tells us? Particularly when we were in the heap of this coronavirus pandemic, there were some devotees who were saying that it's been in the history before where there was a pandemic, devotees went out and chanted, did kirtan, and the pandemic was driven away. And so devotees were encouraging other devotees to go out there and do Harinam Sankirtan. Meanwhile, all health officials have been telling everybody to stay indoors, social distancing. So my question is, when and where do devotees use their intelligence to understand that, okay, we have this material body, the material body has needs, and these are the needs that we need to do to make sure that we keep the body and the soul together. Because sometimes it's so insulting to the point that one who is not a member of ISKCON, looking inside ISKCON, will consider whether these people are actually humans, because they don't seem to act as if they are humans. Because if everybody is encouraged to stay indoors to help curb this pandemic, and you are encouraging your followers to go out there, I'm not saying that our leadership did that, but there were few leaders whom I know who were encouraging devotees to go out there and do kirtan. So my question is, where do we draw the line between using our common sense, God-given common sense, and then a situation where it goes beyond our common sense? What our common sense is telling us actually doesn't help, it doesn't work, so we have to resort to Krishna's instructions. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's very difficult sometimes because I may have a different opinion, someone else might have a different opinion. Even now, so many people are saying we should take the vaccine. Some people are saying, oh no, don't take the vaccine. People have their different opinions. So, it's been difficult even for the GBC to say. Finally, they said everyone should do what they think is best, but we suggest you take the vaccine, right? So in that situation, it's very important that devotees follow the civil authorities in the place where they're living, because just as you're saying, otherwise people are thinking, what kind of delinquent people are these Hare Krishnas? They don't even follow the local authorities. So it's very important to follow the laws of the land and follow the laws of the authority. And if you don't know, ask your temple authority. And it's best to try to live in a sattvic way. Try to be humble and not be arrogant and flaunting the rules of society or the rules that we get from elders. So be humble, follow authorities, and when there's so many different opinions on so many different things, pray to Krishna, use your intelligence, and try to not be judging others, but judge yourself, because as I said earlier, I myself am full of faults. So I have enough work to do trying to rid my own character of all these unlimited faults, rather than trying to rid the world of their faults or rid the other people of their faults. I can try to help the world by giving mercy in whatever ways possible. But discernment in this situation is, to be cautious and to follow the civil authorities, follow the temple authorities. If the temple authorities, you're saying that that was not the situation, the temple authority was not saying to go out and do Harinam Sankirtan. I mean, certainly that is there in the history. Sometimes there's a terrible pandemic and some great holy person is able to go out and stop the spread of disease. So those are extraordinary miracles that have happened sometimes. We see that in the stories of the saints. But best to follow civil authority, to be humble, look for the faults within my own self. And I think that's the best advice. I hope that's helpful.
I have one last question, Mother, please. My question is continuing on this pandemic and attachments and detachments. We have had so much philosophy for years. Being attached to the body of taking the vaccine or not taking the vaccine, is it not also attachment to the material body?
Well, but the body is a gift, just like Lord Chaitanya was telling Sanatana Goswami. You want to kill, so you want to destroy someone else's property? You've already given this body to me. This body is my property. So you've given this body for Krishna's service. So you want to destroy that body that you've already given away? What kind of a person destroys the property of another person? So you've already given that body for Krishna's service. And also, if we don't take the vaccine, we're risking the lives of others. So maybe we think, oh, I don't care if I live or die. But by not taking the vaccine, then we can also be a risk to other people. So each one of us should decide ourselves. It's not something, it's not a dictation coming down from anyone. Decide yourself, but, preserve your life because it's been given to Krishna's service, and care for the lives of others. You don't want to infect the lives of other people either. I hope that's helpful.
Yes,
I see someone wearing a mask. Good, he's outside wearing a mask. Thank you for wearing a mask, protecting the people in your community. Haribo.
Thank you so much. I've come to the Indian Embassy, so
Right. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Mother, for this class. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for your inspiring Krishna consciousness. Haribo.
Bhavya Mercy. We ask if you want to kindly unmute yourselves and let's chant Hare Krishna for Mother to come, please.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Krishna
Hare Bol,
Krishna.
Andrea.
Hare
Nice to see you.
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama.
Hare Ram, Ram Ram,
Rama
Hare
Rama.
Rama, Hare, Hare.
Thank you all so much for joining. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hemalata. Haribo.